The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Hello there, everybody. This is Alan Blumkin. I'm back with my good friend David Nemec, another session of David Nemec's History and Trivia. And today we're going to discuss the best and worst teams in four American League franchises, four of the original 8. So hope you enjoy it, and hope we can add some comments that will hopefully increase your knowledge. Welcome, David.
Welcome, you too, Al. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Yes, it's been a while, but we both have been through a number of things lately.
Yep.
Okay, who do you want to start this with? The Yankees?
Well, the Yankees are the easy one to start with because we can, I think we talked about this. We should just disregard the 2 seasons of 1901, 1902, when the American League, when it first started, the Major League, based his franchise in Baltimore, hoping that the 1890s, which had been pretty good baseball in Baltimore, that Baltimore would indeed become a fairly good baseball town again, but it didn't happen. So the Yankees, by 1903, were based in New York, playing in a place called Highland Park, and up in New York, and they weren't called the Yankees, they were called the Highlanders as a result. And they started out as a pretty good team, actually, by 1903. They didn't really inherit the Baltimore players, most of which drifted hither and yon. And by 1904, they were in hot contention, and they could have won the pennant, but they hadn't changed that doubleheader games that they were supposed to play in New York and Highlander Park to Boston late in the season, and ended up losing a couple of key games with being behind the race Jack Cheeseborough. But they were a good team, and they were a good team in 1906 again. And if we want to talk about their really good teams, we really can't start until the 1920s. And I think we could probably, we might even have a disagreement right away. What do you think the best Yankees team was prior to expansion?
The best Yankee team prior to expansion was probably the 1927 Yankees. I know a couple of the teams with DiMaggio in their late 30s were in contention for that. The Stengel teams were, excellent, but the only one that came close was the 53 team, and they didn't win 100 games because they won 99, and they had 3 games that were rained out that were never made up.
Yeah. Yeah, they did. But you're right. I think the 27 team was a very good team. I don't think it had the pitching and Koenig at short and Dugan at third were serviceable at their positions. They weren't great players by any means, and catching was a real problem. I like the 1939 team. I think even though Gehrig had to quit early in the season when he was diagnosed with ALS, and they had to bring in Babe Dahlgren as a last-moment replacement for him at first base. It really didn't much make a difference. I think either you or I could have played first base with them in 1939, and they still would have been a very good team. As it was, I think they were quite a strong team and had an extremely deep pitching staff. I think they had about 8 guys who won in double figures. I'm not sure the number, but and they had a rookie in Marius Russo, left-hander, who really was exceptional, and it showed in the series when they had almost no trouble sweeping the Reds. So overall, I would pick the 39 team as the best. and probably put the 2017 second, and then agree with you that probably the 53 team was a pretty close third, actually. It was a very good team. But there were other years too where they had strong teams, and they sometimes even had strong teams when they didn't win it. The year the Senators won, the Yankees were a pretty good team.
In 1954, they won 103 games.
Right.
Finished 8 games behind the Indians.
Yeah, if one were to ask a trivia question, what was Casey Stengel's best team? And if you measure best team by total number of games it won, the 1954 Yankees come in first. They won 103 games, I believe. And
103.
Year, and Cleveland picked that year to win 111.
Yeah, because Cleveland beat up the bad. Yeah, Cleveland beat up the bad. It's funny, that year is very unusual. The White Sox won 94 and finished third, and the Red Sox were fourth and won 69. The Indians beat the hell out of the bad teams more than the Yankees did.
Yeah,
because they split the season series.
Yeah. Well, that was pretty much the way. That was the way it went. There was a key doubleheader in Cleveland in early September, and when Cleveland swept both games, after that it was just a matter of playing out the rest of the season. The Yankees really were never a threat after that.
I remember watching on TV that doubleheader. Yeah.
You watched it? You saw it?
Yeah, I saw it. And basically, because I started following in 51, and I wasn't used to the Yankees ever losing to anybody. So I'm 11 years old at the time, and very, very upset.
And I was in Cleveland at the time, very, very happy because without the Yankees being in the under Stengel being in the American League, the Indians probably would have had 3 or 4 pennants in there. But they kept losing the close ones, and they finally got a team that really put it together with their pitching and won 111 games. And it really took a team that, to win well over 100 games in order to beat the Yankees, because they were right there with 103 wins. But so I think we're both in agreement. Probably, I would think, as far as the worst Yankees team went,
1912, one of those years they finished with.
Yeah, they finished a bad last in 1912 under Harry Wolverton, and they brought in Frank Chance, thinking he worked some magic, and basically, had the same team in 1913, and I think they won like 53, 54 games. But they were still well out of contention. They had some decent pitching. They had pretty good pitching, actually. Guys like Ray Caldwell, Les Ford, George McConnell, Ray Fisher. Those guys were. They turned out to be very good pitchers in the teams. Jack Warhop was in the mix too. Their pitching wasn't bad, but they had Hal Chase, and they ended up trading Chase in the middle of the 13th season to the White Sox for Babe Borton and Raleigh Zeider, neither one of which was a factor for any major league team. It was just a matter of getting rid of Chase and hoping for the best. But
Chase was very good, but he had the reputation of not playing up to level quite a few times.
I know. We'll never really know what really went on in Chase's head. But there are people who rated him one of the greatest ball players of the first half of the 20th century, and there are other people who were disgusted with him and said they wouldn't want him on their team under any conditions. But so the Yankees are fairly easy in that they didn't really have any bad teams.
No,
they finished last in 6 and 6, but by half a game, and they still feel that for them fairly weak teams in the late '60s and early '70s, but still, in all, they had some good ball players, and they really didn't. Once they put it together in the early '20s, got roots in 19 for the 20 season. They were, except for the Warriors, they were a strong team pretty much throughout.
Yeah, well, basically they, Jake Rupert took out the mortgage on Fenway Park. So Harry Frazee, who owned the Red Sox at the time, started sending players. Ruth wasn't the only one. They started sending a number of players to the Yankees over the next 5 years, and there were, I think, half a dozen players on the 23 Yankees, which won their first World Series, that had been on the 1918 Red Sox.
The Yankees decimated the Red Sox, with trades and so forth, and almost made them look like a farm team in the 20s. And we can move to the Red Sox because it's interesting. The worst team the Yankees ever had during that period was 25. Because they didn't finish out of the first division after that ever. Yeah, and 25
stomach ache or gonorrhea or whatever, they're still debating to this day, and he got suspended. Got to an argument with him, and he got suspended. But the worst team they've ever had in their history was 1990, when they were 65 and 97, and just missed losing 100 games.
Yeah, that was a bad team. And really, that was after expansion. But
after expansion,
But during the expansion years, I think we can probably settle on the 12 team as being the weakest. And we could turn to the Red Sox because their fate was in a woman with the Yankees right from the start. I mean, the Red Sox won the 1904 pennant, took it kind of out of New York's hands at the very end of the season, and that was Boston's last. Boston had won the pennant in 1903 also, and that was Boston's last strong season until 1912.
They won 12, 15, 16, and 18.
And they became, I think if you just took the first 2 decades of the 20th century and said what was the best American League team during those 2 decades overall, most people, I think, would conclude the Red Sox. The Red Sox didn't always win, and they didn't win more pennants, for example, than the A's, but they always had fairly decent teams throughout that period. It was rare that they finished below 500. They had a really bad team in 1906. Other than that, they were a pretty solid team. And you could probably even make a case that one of those teams in those years was the Red Sox strongest team prior to expansion. I don't know. It was a different kind of ball certainly in 1946 when they won for the last time prior to expansion. But I think their 1912 team was a very good team, and even there were a couple other teams. Their 16 team, I thought 15 and 16. They had both years. He had player manager Bill Kerrigan at the controls, and Kerrigan is I think the only player manager ever to win consecutive pennants and not make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
more than just pennants. He won the series both years. But he made a mistake in coming back and after he retired from managing and playing, and to manage the Red Sox in the 20s after many of their good players had been, pirated away by the Yankees in one-sided trades or sales, and Red Sox field was some terrible teams in the 20s. And
were you on Cyber National in 2002 in Boston?
I was. Yes,
yeah, because some relative of Harry Frazee gave a talk, and somebody asked me what I thought about it. I said, all I know is that when he took over the team, they were world champions. When he left the team, they were laughing stock of the American League.
Yeah.
I said, that's all I have to know.
Yeah.
And I know the 32 team was terrible.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, I think that may have been their weakest team of all prior to expansion. Maybe their weakest team ever, period. They were just awful. But then they got a new ownership. Yawkey came in, brought some money, had a desire to put forth a winning team. Picked up guys like Grove and Jimmy Fox, so that by the end of the 30s, the Red Sox were contenders again. They didn't break through again until '46, but they were still, they still had some fairly strong teams, first division teams. But then in the '50s, they kind of went sank in the doldrums. They really never contended.
48, 49, and 50, they had tremendous hitting.
Yeah.
But outside of Mel Parnell and Ellis Kinder, they had no pitching.
Yeah. They lost the pennant in the last day of the regular season in 48, 49.
In 48. And we used to have book talks in Barnes & Noble. This is going back quite a few years. And there's a guy named Richard Toffeller came out with a book on the 39 Yankees. He was talking about what a great manager Joe McCarthy was. So I yelled out, Benny Galehouse. And I looked at McCarthy's overall managerial record. He was a great manager when they won by 9-10 games, which was the Yankees and whoever. The 5 years he managed teams that were 3 games out or less, he lost 3-game difference or less. He lost all of them.
Yeah.
30 with the Cubs, 33 and 30. I think it was 30. No, sorry. 30 with the Cubs, 35 and 40 with the Yankees, and 48 and 49 with the Red Sox.
Yeah. No, and you were in San Diego, I know, because you and I roomed together at the convention, and Bobby Dorr, fortunately, was there, and he gave a talk, and I can't remember who asked him, Bobby, why did they pick Benny Galehouse to pitch? And my memory is that Dorr kind of hedged on it and just didn't really want to come out and say too much. I don't know if you recall that well enough to remember exactly what he said, but it was a question he didn't really want to handle, and probably that's true of the whole Boston team in that year. After that.
Well, in Louisville in 1997, Mel Parnell was one of the attendees. I asked him about that, because he said he fully expected. He was a rookie in 1948. He fully expected to start that game, and he was very surprised. And he said to me just one thing. He said McCarthy doesn't like rookies.
Well, Parnell was a left-hander too.
But he was successful in Fenway.
He was, but it was too early in his career to be able to predict that he would be a success.
He won 15 and 8 that year. 15 and 7, 15 and 8. Then in 49, he won 25 games.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's Benny Galehouse was, but you look at Benny Galehouse and then you compare that choice And if it had gone the other way, Denny Galehouse would be as famous now as Howard Emke. Mac's choice to pitch a crucial game in the 29 series picked him out of nowhere to pitch it. And, Mac got great credit for doing that. The guy must be a genius in order to know that he's going to get a game like that out of a pitcher who looked like he was pretty washed up during the regular season. But Gales was still a decent pitcher in '48, but certainly not the guy he wanted to be on the mound in that last game. But so I would say that I would say the 12th team is probably the strongest team for expansion. And I think you're right. 32.
The 32 team being the worst than the 06 team.
Yeah, they were really awful. Yeah, it's even hard to get anybody in that team that went on to do much, but it's even hard to construct what the regular lineup was. Yeah, they lost 111 games. Wow, I didn't realize it was that bad.
Yeah.
And attendance was 182,150. Can you imagine that?
Well, you have the Depression.
The Depression, yeah.
Yeah, you had maybe the weather was too hot. Because we were in St. Louis one year. I'm sitting next to Bob Tiemann. And I always read that the Browns had 81,000 in 1935. I asked them if they had individual game totals. He said no, they didn't. They didn't want to bother releasing them. They said the reason was, it was right in the middle of Depression. It was one of the hottest summers they ever had. So nobody went there. The team was terrible, obviously. So nobody went there.
Yeah, but they had the 32 Red Sox had Dale Alexander, with some still credit with a batting title in 1932, and he did qualify. He had the number of bats. It's close. It's close. He really didn't have.
But in those days, it was 100 games was the standard.
It was 100 games or 400 bats were almost all the periods and Alexander had 392 at bats and 61 walks. Now he would not have gotten the batting title. He was given it that year, and I think was he the first to be given it on a last place team?
I don't know. But there were a number of cases at
Larry Doyle
Hargrave and Debs Garms. They didn't come close to having a number of bats, but they played in 100 games.
Yeah.
And then what happened with Ted Williams in 1954 when he had 386 at bats and walked 115 times.
Yeah,
that's why they put in the play appearances instead of the at bats.
Yeah. It's so the Red Sox. So I think we can agree on 32, and I would go with 12. Would you go with 12 as the best team prior to expansion? And then we move on to two teams that really struggled. The Washington Senators and the St. Louis Browns. The Browns.
Yeah, you want to do the A's next week then?
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're right. Forget the Browns. Let's take the A's. No.
Yeah.
You're right. Let's stay with the A's. Yeah, and let's go to the A's. In fact, because the A's were started in the American League under Connie Mack in 1901, and Mack managed the team until almost the very end when they left Philadelphia.
His last year was 1950, yeah.
Yeah, 1950. And so for half a century, Connie Mack was at the controls. And nobody else has come close to that as a manager. And
well, if you own the team, it's very hard to get fired.
Yeah, it is. Not only did he own the team, but his sons had shares in the team. And,
Yeah.
Initially, Ben Scheib was the major owner, but by the time the team got to the the 50s, the 40s, and the 50s, and the Max owned pretty much the entire club.
I'm reading. I started a book the other day on the history of the Kansas City Athletics, and the first 35, 40 pages are on the sale and transfer. And the Mack family was in total disarray. The two sons, neither of whom were any mental giants, Roy and Earl, were hassling with each other, and it was a mess. The Philadelphia group wanted, and they have to drop out. And Del Webb was pushing Arnold Johnson because Arnold Johnson owned Yankee Stadium, and they had a number of common business interests, so he wound up getting the team.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think their best team was 1930, or 1929 and 1930.
Yeah.
You might want to go back to the dynasty they had in the early 19-teens.
Yeah, they had a good team in 1910, and they had an even better team in 1914, and they were swept by the Boston Braves out of nowhere in the World Series, and that to this day there's always been suspicion about that series, whether it was really on the level or not. It seemed impossible that the A's, as strong as they'd been all year, could suffer a 4-game collapse against a National League team that really wasn't all that strong, but just put on just enough to take the pennant.
Well, Mack brought that team up because several of them, I think, went to the Federal League, and he sold Eddie Collins to the White Sox after signing him to what in those days was a huge contract.
Yeah.
And and of course when the Black Sox scandal happened, and they won in 1917, the White Sox, and when they won in 1919, a lot of the players that were involved with the Black Sox scandal hated Collins because of what he was getting paid.
But it's interesting because you can make a case that the 14 team, despite losing the series, was the strongest A's team put on the field during before they left Philadelphia. And then look at the fact that probably the worst team they put on the field, or the worst team any American League team put on the field, was 1916 team.
Oh yeah, I have a book on that. Yeah, cool. But in
a 2-year period, this team went from the penthouse to the sub basement, and incredible how they could put it. I think Mack was just in a peak of and just anger and dismay that his team had done so badly. Just didn't care, and the players he put out in 16, 15 and 16, 17 were really, really a sad group, and they set all kinds of negative records. And looking at stuff like that always kind of turned, even as a kid, turned my head to look in a different direction than other people were looking when it came to Connie Mack. I was saying to myself, how could he put out a team that bad? It's impossible. Yeah.
And the little factoid about 1916, one of their catchers was Billy Meyer, who later went on to manage the Pirates from 48 to 52, and he managed the 52 Pirates who won 42 games. Lost 112. So he was associated with two of the worst teams in Major League history.
Yeah.
But and Mack, when he unloaded the team after 31, Lefty Grove from 30 and 31 had two of the greatest pitching seasons ever.
Yeah.
And because his ERA was a couple of runs lower than the league ERA. But I think there were several reasons. First of all, the Depression. Second of all, in those days there was no media coverage, no radio or anything like that. And third thing was that Pennsylvania didn't permit Sunday baseball until 1934.
Yeah. But Grove got his share of press though, because he got and it's and you and I of course both know Dick Thompson's book on West Farrell very well, and Thompson built a very strong case that during the same time period when Farrell came up, which was 29 really, until the late 30s when Farrell began to fade quicker than Grove did, that Wes Farrell actually was a more effective pitcher than Grove, because Grove was saved by McCarthy. Thompson made the case that Grove pitched very seldom against the Yankees or contenders. Grove mopped up against the bottom feeders, and whereas Farrell was taking on all comers. And it was a good book, and you could argue it both ways, but Dick certainly presented his side of it very well.
When we were in West Palm Beach in 2000, he brought that up. Yeah. Yeah, because I mentioned that Grove's, those 2 seasons that Grove had in 20, and Grove, of course, was held down in the minors. In those days, the minor league teams owned the players in most cases. And Baltimore, he was in Baltimore in the International League for 6 years.
And so it looked to be that he could have probably come up 2 or 3 years earlier.
Oh, yeah.
But in his rookie year in 1925, he led the league in strikeouts, but with a very low total for a leader. It was less than 150, I think. And he also led the league in a lot of negative departments. So Grove did not exactly take the league by storm as a rookie. Mickey Cochran did, and Jimmy Fox, who came up at the same season. The 3 of them all came up in 25. Fox played only a handful of at-bats. Cochran right away was the regular catcher. And a very strong rookie season.
When did Simmons come up?
24, I think, 23 or 24. So I think it was 23. But Simmons by 25 has blossomed big time. He hit in 380s. So you had those 4 guys, and really the core of a very strong team that would not actually burst through and take pennants until 1929.
They pushed the Yankees to the limit in 1928.
They did.
Yeah, and they won the 3 in a row, and then he started selling them off. Yeah.
So
they were terrible in the late 30s and 40s.
And
they were terrible most of the time after the war.
Well, 48 they were in the first division for quite a while, and they actually were in the pennant race until September. But that was it.
The 52 team finished in 4th place for the winning record. That was the year of Bobby Shantz.
Bobby Shantz really pushed that team over the hump. But I was living in West Palm Beach in 54 and going to school there, and the A's trained in West Palm Beach at Connie Mack Stadium. And I had the privilege of watching them play in exhibition games against the Yankees, Dodgers, all the teams that would come in. And I remember watching the A's just in batting practice. They did not look like a major league team even in batting practice. Guys were having trouble getting the ball out of the infield. They had, really marginal players at a lot of positions. And I felt sorry for Eddie Juice, who'd been with the team for a while, that he had to manage them. And Pete Suter, who'd been a lifetime member of the A's, had to play with that team because they were really a terrible team. And
they had Elmer Vallo.
They had Elmer Vallo. Yeah,
with Gus Arniel and Dave Philly there, or they were still with the White Sox.
Philly was gone. Zernial, yeah, I think you're right about Zernial. I have a feeling he was, if I remember, he was their pretty much their only. They had Lou Rimmer.
The only power hitter.
Yeah,
and,
he was the only guy.
And Fane is like in the top borderline in the top 10 of on base average for all time.
Yeah, he was gone by then. They traded him, and
they got Eddie Robinson for a year, and then Eddie Robinson.
Yeah, Limmer sharing first base with Don Ballweg, I think. And,
Eddie Robinson is right now the oldest living former ball player, 100.
Yeah. But the one thing they did have in '54 was they had Vic Power, who had come to them from the Yankees.
Yeah.
The Yankees did not want to integrate at all, but they knew they were going to have to eventually, but did not want their breakthrough player to be Vic Power, and they dealt into the A's.
Yeah,
knowing he was ready for the majors, and
supposedly he had a light-skinned girlfriend, who's Puerto Rican.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I remember.
I was in Cleveland. Yeah.
By the time he joined the Indians, and he was a really he was a really popular figure around town. Seen driving his pink Cadillac convertible, and with top down usually, and people knew him. And he was a popular player, so the A's weren't at a complete loss in '54, so it definitely wasn't their worst team ever. I think we have to go with 16 for that.
Yeah, there were some teams in between 38 and 42 that were terrible, but the Phillies, were a lot worse. Yeah,
that's what. Yeah, it took the sting away because because they, I think you're right. Between them, there were years when in between them they couldn't win 100 games.
Yeah.
So it was terrible. And last we come to the Washington Senators, which really are an interesting team because they had a very, very checkered history.
The worst team is go ahead. The worst team is the 04 team.
Yeah, probably. And they were horrible in the early going, and the only thing that kept them on, they managed to pick up Ed Delahanty, get Delahanty to sign with them, but Delahanty then died in a tragic accident in 1903, and then they had nobody until they picked up Walter Johnson, and Johnson for years struggled with bad teams, but they had a couple of good teams in the early teens. In 12 and 13, they were actually in contention, and then they broke through in 24 and 25, and then began sinking again, and had one last great season in 33, where they won the pennant. And one of those 3 years was definitely their best team. I'm not sure which one. I don't really have a personal choice on this. Do you?
Well, yeah, 2014 because they won the World Series.
Well, that's a good way to. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah. I'll go with that too. That was
a
tough. Yeah.
A funny story. Al Anderson, I was visiting him. God knows, this had to be in the early 70s or whatever, a long time ago. And he had some sort of baseball game with cards or whatever. And I forget what it was and how you played it. But we picked the 8 worst teams ever up to that point. And the team advanced by losing. And the final became between these Spiders 1899 Spiders and the 1904 Senators, and the 1899 Spiders beat them.
Wow.
I think they.
Saw that. I never.
Yeah,
No,
I
never,
remember what. I can't ask him because he's gone. But
yeah, I know.
In fact, I did a little bit. Somebody interviewed me for a radio station, and Steve, a friend that was working for a radio station. He got me an interview when the Orioles, in that 21 game losing streak in 1988, about the 04 Senators, and they were something like 30 games out of seventh place. I think the seventh place team was one game under 500, because if they had won two games, extra games, Washington would have been the only team in the league with a losing record, which was pretty hard to do back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were pretty mediocre to bad in the 50s. I mean, 53, they were 77 and 77. I think that was the best record they had until the last year in there. It was 1960. And by that time, they had Killebrew and Allison and Jim Lemon, Roy Sievers. Sievers was gone in 1960. But they were starting to improve. Pasquale was starting to show, he was very good. And they moved him to Minnesota and brought in an expansion team.
Yeah, the Senators in the late 50s were terrible. They were a terrible draw. They didn't have much. They had Harmon Killebrew signed with them, and they were so bad that Killebrew's development in the minors normally would have taken him by his second or third season to AAA at least. It may have even brought him up. With the Senators, it only took him as far as, I think, Chattanooga, because they didn't have a team in AAA.
Yeah, they didn't have
a AAA team even. Yeah, that's how bad they were. Griffith was running the team on a shoestring. They were drawing under $500,000. Other teams were drawing close to $1 million or over, and nobody wanted to play in Washington.
And another thing they did after 1954, because of Sievers, it was a very, very hard place to hit home runs.
Yeah.
And after Sievers, they brought the left field fence in quite a bit, and then the home runs picked up. In fact, I read a book years ago on the 43 Senators and Rays. The Homestead Rays played there from the Negro League. And in 1943, I think it was, Josh Gibson hit more home runs in like 40 games in Griffith Stadium than the entire Senators team did in 81 and 77 games.
Yeah. I think there was 1 year where the Senators did one home run at home the whole year. I think Joe Cool hit a home run in Griffith Stadium, and he was the only guy who did.
Oh, wow.
That was, I think, during the war years. And
there's a long thread on Facebook a few days ago on Cecil Travis. And he was one of the great tragedies. He had 359, 41, then went to the military and came out with frozen feet.
Yeah. Yes, Travis was. He wouldn't have made a difference even if he'd come out the same ball player he was in 41, because they were a bad team.
I know that. Yeah.
After the war, they just didn't. They didn't have a farm system to speak of. They had Gil Cohn, who was promising year after year after year, and finally did hit 300 a couple of years. But other than that, it was pretty hard to find much. Bob Porterfield won 20 games 1 year.
53.
It was a very poor team, but it was very hard
Mickey
to find.
That was about it. Yeah.
Well, you had Jackie Jensen played there too, but for
one year and a half.
Yeah, for years.
And then they traded him to the Red Sox for Mickey McDermott and Tom Mumford.
Yeah.
And Mickey McDermott came out with an autobiography a number of years ago called "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Cooperstown."
Yeah.
And in 1953, he was 18-10 with the Red Sox. And he's lost a very tough game near the end of the season. And a woman came over to console him. He said, "F you, lady." It turned out to be Mrs. Yorkie. So they sent him to Washington and said that's where it ended for him, basically.
No, I never heard that story.
Yeah. But yeah, they had Eddie Yost, the walking man. Another three Eddies from that era: Stanky, Juiced, and Yost. Couldn't hit very much, but they walked a tremendous number of times.
Well, Juiced had tremendous power, though, for a guy who wasn't very big. And he was batting leadoff. He was homering, in the mid-20s some years.
He was. He had the worst average in the National League. I think it was in 1943. It was one of those years where he was with the Braves. And then he had the worst when he was with the A's in the American League when it was 1947. Yeah,
he was. But there were two Eddies in the American League in the late 40s, and
Eddie Lake,
Eddie Lake and Eddie Juice. And Juice, you could look at and say, I can see why this guy drew a lot of walks because he had power. And you had to be careful how you pitched him. But Eddie Lake had low averages, no power. And it was a mystery to me why would this guy do so many walks? And I never talked to anyone who saw him play enough to be able to venture.
Eddie Lake is a record holder. He is a record holder. He has the worst average ever by a player who had more than 600 at-bats in a season.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I think he had something like 211 for the Tigers in 1947.
And that was the record?
That's the record for anybody over 600 at-bats. I did a study on this. I made up a list of players who had 600 and more at-bats and hit under 250.
Huh. Right.
There weren't very many of them.
No, they were still, yeah. Yeah, I remember him. And,
I knew him from the 51 Bowman set, Eddie Lake.
He was still, and I guess he did play too. He still hung on. I didn't realize until that late. That's good. Well, I think we covered these four teams pretty well. We're in pretty much agreement as to where the highlights and lowlights lay, and of course the Yankees had very few low points.
They were not outside 1904. They were not very good until the dead ball was over, and they had gotten Ruth, and they got Panek, and they got I think they got Dugan, and they got a bunch of them from the. I think Shorkey came from the Red Sox. There's Panek came from them. There was a number of them that came directly from the Red Sox. Everett Scott, the second baseman, and when Rupert bought the team, they started spending some money. Yeah. And Rupert, I read the biography of Rupert that he couldn't stand, when they won by one run, because he expected them to slaughter any team every day.
That's when baseball really changed, when money really became a factor as to which teams were going to be the winning teams. So that once World War I was over, and the 20s came about, it started to be the teams that spent money and were willing to go out and get the players. And guys like Ricky, who started a farm system, the complexion of the game changed dramatically then.
Well, the way it is now, I mean, Ricky and George Weiss and a few of the other GMs from that era would never be able to operate now.
No, not with the salary demands and all that. No.
Yeah.
No.
But, yeah, as I think I mentioned the other day, I've watched maybe 2 innings the entire season.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd get turned off, that I ever get to this point with baseball, but they managed to do it.
They have. Actually, I've been trying to watch baseball more on the Olympics channel than I have on the any of those that carry major league games.
Yeah,
and there hasn't been that much of it on. It hasn't been that much on the Olympics channel either. So NBC has stayed away from women's softball and men's baseball. I don't know why, but we get a lot of skateboarding and stuff like that instead. It's interesting how what's happened to baseball. It's unfortunate, and I don't know that we're going to see much of a turnaround anytime soon. But it'll be a long time if ever again that baseball is really considered to be our national pastime, I'm afraid.
Yeah, in fact, I was telling friends of mine that I think they should make eating an Olympic sport.
It's probably in the cards.
Yeah, because they got to have everything else. I mean, rock climbing.
Well, rock climbing.
Synchronized swimming, rhythmic gymnastics.
It is unbelievable. Yeah, it is unbelievable. Archery.
I love to watch track and field, which I like, but you get all this junk,
Yeah.
So. Time difference is terrible, and what the Olympics have done with the basketball. Anytime the men play a basketball game over there, the NBC puts it on their streaming. They have a streaming service called Peacock, which means you have to pay for this.
Oh, great!
And somebody asked me a while back about. The ESPN, which is in bed with the Ultimate Fighting, they were putting on a pay-per-view show, and somebody asked me if I was going to get that. I said, no, they would have to pay me to watch any of that. Yeah.
No.
But I've never paid a dime to the streaming service, and I'll never do that again. I'll never do that as long as my brain is functioning. Okay?
Yeah, well, it's good talking about these teams again because I saw them, and most of them before the expansion came about. And, some of them I saw in their home parks, and it was good. So let's do the American League West next time.
Yeah.
And I'll look forward to it.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Al. It's good to have been with you again.
Tomorrow, and we'll speak soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.